Get started. So again, thank you everyone for joining tonight. My name is Corinne Smith. I am an EdTech consultant and the founder and CEO of Biltmore Strategy and Solutions. I come from a higher education background as well as living in multiple countries. And I'm looking forward to learning more about our special guest, Danielle Allen's experience also living abroad. And just to ground tonight's event, I wanted to say like this is like more based in workforce development and career strategy when it comes to nuclear. There's so much to it, and I'm still new to it myself. So we'll be on this learning journey together. But I found that it's really important for folks in our community to understand what these opportunities are and the education, skills, and experience that you can build up while following these career paths. So to get us started, I'll share my screen here. First, discuss a little bit about Black IT Academy. So Black IT Academy is a 501(c) nonprofit. We are here as a more Discord-based online community for Black professionals to learn about technology and emerging industries. We host multiple events each week. I have some folks here, JT Taylor, who's the founder of Black IT Academy, and Sunshine and Lee as well, who are our great admins. And some of them also host some of these weekly events. Definitely, feel free to join our Discord and tell us more about what you're interested in learning. And again, like I've been a part of the beta community for about the past year, and I can definitely say like we are definitely one of the most engaged and active online communities I've ever been a part of. Everyone is very approachable, personable, and we are just looking to understand more on how we can support, Black folks in tech as well as entrepreneurship. So please feel free to join our Discord and just like learn and connect with folks. Oh yes, thank you for launching the poll. So I wanted to gauge the audience's background and understanding of nuclear literacy. If you're someone like myself, I'm still very new to it. I know a little bit, and that's why I wanted to have Danielle here, who is a great science communicator and can break things down so that it's digestible and you understand very practical step-by-step actions to be able to continue building up your own education and career strategies. So it looks like here there's a good balance of I know nothing about it, I've heard about it but couldn't explain it, I understand the basics, and it looks like we have some folks who follow the industry somewhat. So that's good to know. And I'll give folks about 10 more seconds in case we have anyone that's just joined to be able to answer. With that, JT or Sunshine, is there anything that you would like to say in terms of Black IT Academy?
No, you're in the right place. So if this is your first time joining any of the webinars, obviously you can see we have an amazing host. We have an amazing host of people. Some are connected from different backgrounds who know each other, but the focus, and you'll see this as a theme in all of our events, is that we're all together, right, collaboratively. So while we do have fun, we post memes, we joke about what's going on in the AI world, who got hacked, what's going on. We also do resume reviews, interview prep, and we refer one another. So our motto is each one teach one. So you're in the right place. Please share your LinkedIn information, follow the links that were posted, and give a shout out to our amazing host and our amazing guests. Thank you.
Thank you. So we just went into the poll, and yes, tonight's guest, Danielle, I'll give a brief introduction. So Danielle's done so much from, being a firefighter, paramedic, first responder. She's also has a degree in Near and Middle Eastern Studies from Princeton. She's a pilot, and now her main focus is a talent recruiter for the nuclear energy industry, as well as a podcast host for Naked Nuclear. With our backgrounds, again, I don't have a technical background. I study anthropology. And one thing about anthropology, I always have this curiosity about humans, understand like how we do things or why people do things. And I'm realizing with various communities, and even like within nuclear, it's a very tight-knit community. It's like once you talk to someone, it's like it builds. And I think that you are a great person for this event because of your the strength in your communication skills. And again, just being able to break things down. So I wanted let me stop sharing. I wanted to be able to have us start like with a foundation in nuclear. And then from there, I'll go into the questions so we can get a bit more depth in understanding the career paths, as well as the like STEM education requirements, especially for parents and guardians who may have a child in K-12, especially in middle and high school. One thing folks need to know is like if you want to declare your major, especially during the college admissions process, you need to have specific math and science requirements met before you graduate from high school. And even then, it's better to understand those things going back to elementary and middle school. It's definitely not something you just prepare for overnight, let alone a year. I work in ed tech, and just from my own experience, it's so competitive and there's just so much information out there. So, this is like, again, this event is just a good start to plant the seed and also, again, be able to share resources for folks to have in hand to know the next steps. So with that, I will open it up to Danielle. We can go into the presentation, but I also just wanted to share with everyone quickly. I found you through my own job interview preparation. I found the
Mhm.
podcast, and only because I had this job interview, I even considered nuclear energy. I, again, coming from like higher education, like going into energy in general as an industry was not at my like at the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, wait, nuclear actually makes sense. Like once I started
Mhm.
watching YouTube videos, listen to your podcasts, also watching YouTube videos from like Osama Bey, who's like also very big in Canada, let alone like internationally. And like I like the way he breaks things down. So it made me realize like with all this discussion about data centers and AI and like the need for data centers to collect all this data, I'm thinking, oh, we need a sustainable and still like clean energy system. And with that, I'm now just kind of diving deep into myself, into like nuclear advocacy, as well as just understanding like how I can use my agency, especially as a Black woman, to tell other Black people about the industry, the career opportunities, as well as just again understand like what's going on in your community.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm very excited. I'm like looking at the polls and I'm like, ooh, who's from where? What are we doing here? I'm like, this is exciting. I host a podcast, Naked Nuclear, and I feel like I'm usually pretty straight-laced on that one. I try to keep it really buttoned up. And typically, when people meet me in person, they're like, wow, you are not like your podcast. That is very science communicating. Then they see me in person, they're like, whoa. But yeah, I like to solve problems. I think that's kind of where I draw my inspiration from, why I like to do different things, why I'm, teaching physics in Vietnam and flying planes and doing firefighting. I just like to see, where are the problems and how can we better look at this as a community, as a society, and be like, what makes the most sense for us to do next? And so that's kind of for me and my background when we're going to kind of get into this presentation. But, if you guys take a moment, like locate in your house or wherever you're at, like where's the nearest wall socket? Like where is it? Okay, like you wouldn't think a second you plug something in and you're like, okay, it works. And if it doesn't work, then you just like flip a light switch and then all of a sudden now it turns on. But we take electricity for granted, and I think that's one of the things that I'm really interested in, and especially within Black communities, where they're going to be siting and locating data centers. Typically, they're also going to be building diesel engines, diesel power generators for data centers. And so we're looking at not just the growth and expansion from the workforce perspective, but are we going to continue to perpetuate environmental harms in historically Black communities? Because that's a big one. We don't want to do that. And so nuclear kind of offers this other newer solution that's actually really old. We've been doing nuclear for a while. And so the presentation today is going to be a high level overview. I would say, definitely listen to the podcast if you think nuclear is cool. The after pops that we have on there are specifically to get more in depth. If you don't have that technical background, we're breaking it down, we're stripping it down. That way people can kind of understand the industry a little bit more. But yeah, just kind of looking at the quiz or the survey here in the poll, a lot of folks are like, I know nothing about it. And that's kind of for a reason. Nuclear wanted to operate in the background for a really long time. And as we started to see this exponential growth of electricity, we'll get into that in the presentation, from AI data centers, electrified vehicles, we started to see like, uh-oh, we don't have the capacity to grow and meet these power needs with solar alone. We keep burning stuff, we're going to keep polluting the atmosphere. So we're kind of in this really interesting conundrum. And so with nuclear, I think a lot of people get a little upset that every time we talk about nuclear energy, we have to go back to the beginning and we have to talk about the technology. And they're like, why do we have to start with the technology? Well, solar panels usually aren't associated with weapons, but nuclear is. And so the reason why we're going to start this presentation with kind of going back to be like, what is nuclear energy? Is because there's this very big conflation between the energy side and the weapon side, and how they've kind of done this dance throughout history. But realistically, the energy side is really something that can change the economic and environmental landscape and forecasts for communities for like 100 years. And for Black people and Black communities, that's really, really impressive. So yeah, like let's get started and get down into the presentation because this is exciting for me. Awesome. Okay, I can.
There we
Perfect. Okay, introduction to the nuclear industry. This is primarily going to be on the energy side. I know we had some people here from Raytheon, maybe Lockheed Martin, that are maybe more on the defense side. But yeah, we're going to be talking about energy today. So, what is nuclear energy? I'm going to be dropping some links in the chat as well. So, one of the things that I think is super helpful for everybody to know is just having resources. So what is nuclear energy? There's actually a website called whatisnuclear.com. It's created by Nick Turan. We just had a podcast episode with him drop. He was one of the first people to start creating content on nuclear. When he was in undergrad, he was like, there's no information about this. And I think a lot of people, when you think, if I ask a question, y'all can feel free to come off mute and we can make this more of a conversation because when I'm recording my podcast, I don't have an audience. So it's just me talking to myself. So I like having people here to actually talk to. But yeah, so if you guys are looking at this picture, this is out of France. You see these big cooling towers. Is that specifically associated with nuclear? When you think about nuclear energy, do you think about these like large cooling towers? You can drop like a yes in the chat or just come off of mute and give me your answer, because I will definitely ask a lot of questions in this presentation. So big cooling towers directly associated with nuclear energy. What do we think? Yes, yes. Getting a couple yeses.
Yes,
Yes, yes, yes, yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Yes.
Yep. So the cooling towers, funnily enough, they are just giant almost always. Yeah, they are associated with nuclear energy. Reminds you of The Simpsons. That's a good point.
go.
They are not necessarily directly tied to nuclear. You could have a plant like this and it can be a coal plant. Because all this is doing, this is steam. That's water coming out of there. And so when we're thinking about nuclear energy, we're going to go into the reactor building. So the reactor building is kind of boring. Oftentimes we're looking here and we're like, where's the reactor building? The reason why we look for the cooling towers is because it's visible. We can see it and it like makes sense. It kind of sticks out and it sticks in our minds. But the reactor buildings, they literally just look like a giant box. So they're not very memorable. So that's actually where the fun stuff is happening is in those giant boxes. You have three cooling towers, so you're probably going to have three reactor buildings on this campus. And so within those reactor buildings, what is happening in a reactor is nothing too crazy. You're pretty much going to have a fuel, so that's going to be uranium, and that uranium is undergoing a process of nuclear fission. And so I think about it as like people at a rave, at a nightclub. It's getting hot in here, literally, like Nelly. As it starts to get hot in here, we're making the water even more hot. And what does hot water do? If you've ever cooked pasta, boiled an egg, turns to steam. That steam is going to spin a turbine and power an electric generator. So we're essentially just spicy rocks, boiling water. Now, it gets a lot more complicated when we think about neutron flux and how we're trying to get core design all dynamic. But a couple of the things within nuclear energy is that uranium is very energetically dense. So you see here, it's like equates to, 1 pound of uranium fuel is 3 million pounds of coal energy and output. Why I want to bring that up is when we're thinking about clean energy, I don't really like the term clean. Nothing's clean. Everything has a process and everything has a waste stream. And so what we're looking at is nuclear is not producing carbon emissions into the air. This is just steam, it's just water. But when we're thinking about coal, we're thinking about the waste. So if you really wanted to power an entire city, to do that with coal versus uranium, you're going to need a whole lot of coal, and you're also going to need to put that coal somewhere. They typically store it in pits. They call them pits. So it's just a giant hole in the ground. So they're storing millions of pounds of coal sludge, coal ash is what they call it, in these open pits. And so that's one thing that we want to think about of why nuclear energy is really helping us move forward is because it's super energetically dense. No combustion happens, so it's zero carbon. And you might think, wait, why are we talking about nuclear energy now? We've had nuclear for a while. So we've had 96 reactors. Right now, I think we're at 94. We've had plants shut down and reopen. So I think we're at 94. We might be 96 at the end of the year again. But this is a really exciting time because we're looking at making more reactor plants, building those reactor plants. And when we talk about building those reactor plants, we're also talking about money, jobs, siting in places that give communities opportunities to make a lot of cash. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, so nuclear and the U.S. energy grid. So a lot of times, okay, so we had, seven of y'all be like, I don't know nothing about nuclear, or I've heard of it, or I can't explain it. It's powering 20% almost of the electricity for the U.S. grid right now. And it's almost somewhere around 56% of our clean energy source. So when we think of clean energy, we're thinking of like solar and wind, and we feel really good, like geothermal or hydro. But for the last, several decades, it's been nuclear. The funny thing is, we haven't been really building that many plants. And so it's fascinating that we really did the main bulk of our building like in the 70s. And what we did in the 70s is still outperforming what we're doing now with solar and wind. And so that's really exciting. The other part is, okay, who has heard of capacity factor? You can be like, yes, thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat. Have you heard of capacity factor? What is capacity factor? Yes, we've heard of capacity factor. Never, never a day. No, 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 no. Anybody else? Okay, so it's really funny. Oh, we got a big no from Ralph. He said no. Said with his chest. Got yes from Drew, but I don't count him because that is my future husband. He's here to support me. The nice thing about the capacity factor is this is how much percent, like what percent of the time is a plant generating electrons that go onto the grid? So if we're thinking about it, so 92% of the time if a plant is in existence 92% of the time it is pushing electrons onto the grid, so
Come on,
it's
bro.
running 24/7
Trying to
seven
keep
days a
one foot
week.
in front of the other, man.
Yep, one foot in front of the other. uh, 24/7, 7 days a week. And so the good thing about a capacity factor is when you have a high capacity factor, this means that you really can stabilize the grid because you're not worried about, solar, you're kind of chasing the sun, wind, you're chasing the wind. And so our energy demand, what happens when y'all come home? You come home, you turn on your TV, you start running your dishwasher, you got your electric stove, you turn your oven on, you do laundry. So when we go home from the day, all of a sudden in our communities, we see electricity demand rises. But what has the sun just done? Set. So now we're kind of working off of this teeter-totter of kind of chasing the power usage. The weird, crazy thing, I have an episode about this, about why capacity factor is so important when we're looking at how we design cities is because we can't kind of use batteries all the time. Energy and electricity need to be used as it's being demanded. Like the supply and the demand have to be like equal. And so this is why capacity factor is really high. And it's the number one clean energy source in the United States. And so, some of these like little quotes in here, twice the electricity per unit capacity versus gas or coal. So I think I've got to find the percentages, but it's like 42 to 50% gas and coal. And so when you drive by one of those power plants, just think about the fact that 92% of the time, that's a in my book, nuclear is producing electrons. And that's really important when we start to think of why this really matters now. So we'll kind of go on to the next slide. Okay, so a couple of misconceptions. Can y'all drop some misconceptions or just things that you've heard about nuclear just in passing? In passing. What have we heard about nuclear? And it could be nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, anything you've heard, atomic bomb research. It is so volatile. Ooh, that's a good one. It's dangerous. Chernobyl. Nuclear energy is bad for communities around it. Iran. Oh, hey,
There's no
geopolitics is
solution.
dangerous.
No
Okay.
solution for nuclear waste.
Yeah, there's no solution for nuclear waste. Working against the environment. Woo! For a group that said they don't know nothing about nuclear, y'all have a lot of misconceptions. That's interesting. That's also by design, though. It takes up a lot of space. What's really fascinating is actually the opposite, Selma. It takes up the least amount of space for how much it creates. So uranium pellets, they're like that big. And this is usually the equivalent to like 1 to 2 pounds or 1 to 2 tons of coal. And so what's really fascinating is, also,
Oh, it looks like we're losing you, Danielle. Can everyone else hear her? It's just on my end.
I lost her audio as well.
Yeah, we lost audio.
I'll give it a couple seconds.
That's what happens when you have this powerful message being
I
delivered.
know.
She was cooking, brother. She was
This-
You,
cooking.
you know me, I'm paranoid.
Okay. Let's see. Can you
Okay.
hear me now?
Yes, it's a bit muffled, but you're back.
Okay, that's so strange. That's so funny. They're like, okay, welcome back.
You're
Yeah,
listening.
the power, this, NSA looking at me on Zoom, like you gotta cut her off, preaching to the people. Yeah, so we're thinking about, as we're looking at waste solutions, it isn't clean. So, what y'all let's go in here. You see the myths that are on here. I know y'all can read, so that's cool. I'm gonna pick some up. Okay, so let's go back to Selma. It takes up a lot of space. It does not. Compared to solar is going to use acres and acres and acres of land. That's really not acceptable if we're using that land for, I don't know, agriculture, city design, things like that. Especially because of the capacity factor as well. Solar also needs batteries. So you have to also have the acreage for the panels, but you also have to have the batteries as well. Let's see, and I'll drop in. I'll send out some of the visuals, the infographics of the space one. Let me see. Has radioactive waste. Did you know coal ash also has radioactive waste? We just set that outside. Ooh.
Mm.
So the interesting thing about nuclear waste as it relates to nuclear energy is all of it is contained. All of it's contained. It's shielded, and not only is it shielded, is we know we track, and we measure and monitor all of those things over the life cycle of it. And so once it's in we call them spent fuel containers. The funny thing about the waste, the nuclear waste, is that up to 90 to 92% of that waste can be reused and recycled. We don't recycle here in the United States, but abroad they do. France recycles their uranium fuel. And so it's funny that we're like, what do we do with the waste? What do we do with the waste? Recycle it, reuse it. We can store it as well. The main thing when we're talking about clean energy systems is what are we putting back into the environment? That is kind of the big thing against it. Nuclear is dangerous. That's actually one of the second myths here. It's one of the safest energy generation sources. produced. And so I rag on coal a lot because coal is very dirty. It's very cancer causing and ends up in your lungs. So as we're kind of concerned about nuclear waste as it relates to like, where is it going? It's all contained. Coal waste is stored in your lung tissue if you live around it. And so that's kind of the other part. But not only that is when we're looking at dangerous or safe, it is a safe operator. Nuclear operates very safely in terms of how many people die or have accidents per year as energy generation. So what's really, really, oh yeah, so safer than wind and solar. Yes, per terawatt created. So as we're looking at how much energy is produced, that's what we're saying is more nuclear is more safe on that. All right, let's go to the next one as to why we're doing nuclear right now. But if you guys have more questions, feel free to like just email me. Y'all got my information. My TED talk on this is about literally about nuclear waste is about to be out pretty soon. So yeah, why is nuclear growing right now? I don't know if you guys ever use chat, AI, OpenAI, Claude, GenSpark, Perplexity, Gemini. Could y'all put that in the chat? Which AIs y'all are using? Because I know y'all the IT Academy. I know y'all don't like me now. I know y'all on some of them AI businesses. Okay, iTinker. I have not heard of iTinker. Claude. Okay. Chat. Yeah, so what's the good thing about all of these systems that we're using? It has memory. It remembers who you are. Even your phone has memory. Your bank account has to know your login. All of that requires data, consistent data over time. And so AI and data centers are driving this massive new electricity demand. So for United States, we've kind of been like kind of just putting along of like, okay, we need a little energy. But now, as we're looking at how much we're going to need, we're seeing this exponential increase. We've seen estimates from 78% to 150% over time of how much energy or electricity the United States is going to need in the next 50 years. Yeah. Oh, iTinker isn't a brand. I use them all.
I was like,
Thank you
that's
for
cute.
clarifying. I was like, oh, iTinker. I gotta look that one out. Yeah. So you use them all. Perfect. Um, but yeah, so nuclear is growing because our electricity demand is growing, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to meet the need with solar, and wind and battery storage alone because of what I talked about with the capacity factors. There's just too much high demand. And so what's interesting right now is we're going to be seeing like these bridges between them of trying to meet the need with like a combined cycle gas turbine and electric, or nuclear, together to meet the need of this demand. But what we don't want to do is meet the need of the demand with coal and gas alone. Because what does that mean? If we supply all of our new electric demand with coal and gas alone, could you put that in the chat? What do you think is going to happen? All of our electricity demand, 78% plus, if we only use coal and gas. Any geniuses in the chat? We got 36 of y'all here. We couldn't meet the demand. More carbon emissions. Ding, ding, ding. Dark sky. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we're gonna suffocate ourselves. We cannot meet this demand with carbon emissions because we're already seeing some of the weird environmental effects because of that. And so yeah, scorch earth. I don't know about you. I like to eat.
Right.
And food comes from the ground outside. I need it to rain. I need the seasons and cycles. My tomato plant is looking a little haggard because here in North Carolina, we're in a drought right now. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why nuclear is growing right now, because we're seeing this increased electricity demand, but we're also seeing advanced reactors coming to meet the need of building in these timelines. And so we've currently got 63 reactors under construction globally, small modular reactors. We have big ones, we're making them small, and hopefully we can kind of build them quicker. We're seeing those take off. So we're seeing a lot of different ways to meet the needs of the electricity demand. But the demand signal right now is the fact that we need electricity, and we're going to meet that with nuclear. All right, let's go on to what y'all really came here to talk about. which is, ooh, the diversity of careers in nuclear. So what's really fascinating specifically for the Black IT Academy is right now nuclear is facing this really large digitalization shift. This is money for y'all, like literal money for y'all. Because what this is meaning is nuclear used to be very paper focused, paper oriented. They'd do everything by hand, manual process. They'd have like 40 signatures to sign off one weld. Like it's slow. And it's slow because I think Unc says something about meltdowns. Solar's never melted down. There's so much regulatory tape around nuclear because, we think about nuclear technologies and we think about they're dangerous. So we need to regulate them. So we have regulated them, but in that regulation, we've slowed everything down with mountains of paper. With the age of digitalization, we're finding AI is taking that solution now. So AI is meeting the need. And so for you guys, what the industry is trying to figure out is how are they going to take these nuclear power plants, these nuclear assets, and digitalize them while keeping them safe from a cybersecurity standpoint, from an IT standpoint. So this is where it's getting really interesting, where they're literally building out the infrastructure on the IT side and cybersecurity side. Because you know what we don't want is anybody being able, from a cybersecurity standpoint, to access our digital reactors. So that's kind of where, from the IT standpoint, we're kind of getting really interested in how do we safely digitize and make faster workflows. Because making faster workflows means that we can kind of keep this industry safe, but also not having to be doing 47 signatures because nobody's got time for that, literally. So that's the on the IT side, but the rest of the industry is ripe for the picking. I work as a recruiter, and so the nice thing is you can do the 4-year route for engineering, but there's also this hidden skills on the trade side. Um, and so right now, trades are big because we're looking at construction. We're looking at how are we gonna, we need welders, we need HVAC, pipe fitters, carpenters, laborers on these plants, but we also have outages. So nuclear, when a reactor needs to refuel, they have an outage. They call it the outage season. It's usually, it operates for about 18 months and then it shuts down. And when they shut down, all of the maintenance gets done that needs to happen over that time. And so this is why outages are really important for the skills and trades, is being able to meet the need of our current operating fleet here in the country. Scientists and chemists, business and policy, operations and maintenance, IT and security. So the nice thing about nuclear is there's something for everyone. These are large cities. A nuclear power plant can host up to 2,500 employees at a time, if not more. And so the nice thing is not only is it hosting a lot of people, if we take an example of Palo Verde, they're trying to be operating for a while. And a while, well, you're like, what's a while? Like, that's really subjective. Like, we're talking like 80 years. So that means like jobs for you, jobs for your kids, jobs for your kids' kids. Like you're looking at the operational life cycle, is generating power, generating taxes for your community over the course of this time. And so for the workforce right now, I think we can go to the next slide on this one. Yeah, this is exciting for you guys. Um, they call it a silver tsunami. I'm not supposed to say that, but it is. Every time I go tour a nuclear power plant, there's somebody else retiring. They're like, "Bye, Dave. Dave's been there for 40 years. He's trying to live a nice retirement." And so we're seeing 40% of the workforce is able to retire within 10 years. Ooh, they're getting nervous. They're getting nervous. But then we also want to triple, sometimes quadruple the nuclear workforce within by 2050. So we're going to need about like 500,000 people to do that. And then the last part that's, kind of really exciting about nuclear is it pays more. Why does it pay more? If you could put in the chat, why do you think it pays more? Why does nuclear pay more? Let it do. Anybody got any ideas? It's dangerous. What did I say? It's not dangerous. It is well regulated. It's the regulation. Niche market, clearance. Yes, you need clearance, less acceptable. Yeah, so all of those things, not as saturated as much, not advertised as much. Yeah, so all of those are accurate. Those are accurate statements. Maybe not the dangerous part, but all those are accurate statements of nuclear requires a threshold of you must do the right thing. We don't tolerate y'all not doing the right thing. And so there's not really room for wiggle room in terms of, the quality side, the liability, the insurance. We're looking at people who do the right thing, people who have clearance. Let me give you an example. So one of the first podcast episodes I did with Kelly Davis, she works in Cape Fear Community College. She's worked in the nuclear power plant. She's the director there for nuclear power technology program. When she worked there, she said she has to tell her students they feel like they're being micromanaged when they first start working on a plant because you're not allowed to text and walk at the same time. You're not allowed to text and walk at the same time. And that's because of the safety regulations. If you're going down the stairs, you have to hold a handrail. They're not going to have you go trip and fall into the reactor vat. Nope, we're not doing that. And so that is the safety, the level of safety is really the biggest difference culturally when people switch into the nuclear industry is because of the fact that like you literally cannot text and walk. Like that is how strict the safety is. It feels like you're being micromanaged if you've kind of been outside the industry. But once you come inside, there's a nuclear culture to uphold because, as we're looking at if one reactor has a problem and it makes the news and it makes everybody go, ah, the industry could stall a bit. And so that's why we're doing this. We're getting more public perception out there because of the fact that the nuclear safety thresholds are very high. That's why they're the highest safely operating energy source that we have. But in order to do that and maintain that, we got to pay you well and we got to get you going. So I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna start trying to get into the chat and answer some of your questions as well, because there's definitely a lot of questions that I think we can get into.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Like, again, like this is why I love your podcast because it's like I understand what you're saying. It's easily digestible and it just makes sense. So thank you so much for breaking that down. Some key numbers that definitely stuck out to me was the 40% of the current workforce about to retire. That's a lot of
A lot,
jobs. That's a lot of
a lot,
people.
a lot of people.
And we need to figure out quickly, like, how do we build up these workforce development programs? And again, that's one of the reasons why we have this session, which I hope to continue to build on because this is definitely just to plant the seed to bring public awareness. And with that, I like to gauge everyone's interest. Like, what are the type of roles that you're interested in? And if it's not currently listed on our Zoom poll, feel free to drop it in the chat. This will be great for Danielle and I to know so that we can like facilitate our conversation around what are the needs of the community.
Good.
Engineering, project and program management. I know that is very big, especially with the new AI software companies that are definitely coming out with the, again, to your point about digitization, human resources, definitely finance. Money is very important. You need to have the money to fund these projects. Communications, even public affairs, regulatory compliance. Yes.
I'm just gonna drop some links in here.
And we have some folks exploring. Again, that's why we're here so that you can learn about what is currently out there. And again, there may be jobs that may not even exist today, but in the next 5 to 10 years, as new reactors are being built, there may be new job titles that also come out.
Perfect,
Thanks.
perfect.
I'll give it a couple more seconds.
Project management. This is good. This is very helpful.
And I guess to begin, like building off of your presentation, Danielle, um, I find that again, just from my own personal background, like when I associated nuclear, I just thought automatically nuclear engineering, STEM. I'm not a STEM person, but and I know you had a range of roles that you don't need a 4-year degree for. Also, there's more of the skilled trades. That's also like a huge, do you know by hand like the proportion of skilled trades jobs that make up the nuclear industry?
Yeah, so on the outage side, so every time there's an outage, maintenance, so that would be like radiation protection people, people who are doing reactor operators. So people who are like operating nuclear reactors do not need a 4-year degree. They need they call them NLOs, like so non-licensed operators, and SROs, senior reactor operators. But you don't need a 4-year degree to do those. And so I think the best thing to do is if you're looking at like, how do I get in? Like, look to see where are the nuclear plants by you. So I think that's really helpful for people because you never think about where any electricity or energy generating plant or facility is in relation to where you live. Um, and so I think that's the first thing is find out, do you have a nuclear plant in your state? And if so, like, is it drivable? If not, like, send an email, information, because I think that's the biggest thing on the percentages. It's going to depend on what that plant actually needs, whether they have those contractors and subcontractors out. But when you have a nuclear power plant or facility in your state, you also have the supply chain. So you have all of the
Mhm.
suppliers that are either, on the fuel side or on the valves, and they're fixing things. So there's not just working at the plant itself, but there's working at every single, like, we had 16 people say they want to do engineering. So engineering design is going to be happening at these engineering consulting firms, not just at the plant itself. And so that's why I say, get in contact with plants, with their communications teams, with their information teams to understand, what does this facility need? Where is it in its life cycle? That way you can kind of get a better understanding of where you might fall into that.
That actually directly relates to me because I moved to Phoenix about a year and a half, yeah, a year and a half ago from LA. I didn't realize Palo Verde was down the street. Like I'm less
Down
than
the
an
street, yeah.
hour away from the
Yes.
country's second largest nuclear power station. So I was like, oh, this is good to know. And then I started learning like, oh, it actually supports 20% of the local energy or electricity
Mhm.
for the greater Phoenix area. So I was like, oh, this is good to know. This is why, again, it really is about awareness. So to take a step back, when it comes to uh, skills, so for a lot of folks here, they may be interested or may not have a technical degree. What are the skills from like outside of nuclear that are transferable?
Ooh, that's a good one. People like to see um any sort of, like, if you're leading a project and you're keeping things on task, on schedule. That's kind of a big one. The next one I think would be integrity. Like, this person follows the rules. This person makes sure that things done or get done right. Uh, and I think those are things that are transferable in terms of nuclear is looking for culture, I would say, more than anything else. Is because of the fact, if you look at a utility, they'll take you from, a security guard all the way to a senior reactor operator. They're like, you can learn on the way. But but what they really want to know is, are you going to adhere to the safety culture that we've put out? And so that's when you're kind of coming into the industry from an adjacent field. Let's say it's oil and gas. Let's say it's just general construction. I've talked to welders that have worked both in general construction and nuclear construction, and they're like, general construction does not translate to nuclear construction. It's a lot slower because you have to make sure things are done right. You have to show the paper trail. Um, and I think that's kind of one of those things that people don't really talk about, is I can give you all like the tips and tricks. I'm like, oh, this company's looking for power buy and blah, like all of those things you can look up, but kind of the secret hidden stuff is really culture related.
That's good to know, especially with the contracting. I spoke with someone recently about potential contract work, especially for companies that could travel when building up these new reactors, but you got to be sure that you have the right tools and capabilities to be able to fulfill the needs of the build. So that's really good to
Mhm.
know. I'm definitely going to get to questions in the chat, but I'm going to kind of just take it back a bit just so that we have a strong foundation understanding. what are the tangible and intangible or soft skills that folks should be aware of and begin to build as part of their career trajectories, whether that's nuclear or another job or career in the energy industry. So I know you spoke a bit about the skilled trades. I would like to know, like, what are the most common barriers for people trying to break in from those non-traditional backgrounds, and what strategies are effective?
Yeah, I would say like you mentioned before, nuclear is a tight-knit community. And I think right now they're kind of going through this transition of I use it kind of like as like the hot person analogy. Like this kid was really ugly in high school and now all of a sudden they're like in college and they're hot and they're like,
Mm,
"Whoa, I am not used to all of this attention. I was busted back then and now I look good and now I have people like talking to me and I am not socialized for that." So I think for the nuclear industry, what's really interesting is people are wondering how to get into the industry. However, they've predominantly relied on workforces related to the nuclear navy as their pipeline. So
mm,
they've kind of done the traditional Navy nuke into a commercial nuclear reactor. Now all of a sudden they're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we get people from maybe working at Amazon? How do we get people, from like the data center side, oil and gas side, construction, engineering side? That is looking a little more like a giant question mark for them. And I think the nice thing though is people who are within the industry are really pretty helpful. And so I think that's where I would say start, at your most local plant.
mm.
But then get on LinkedIn and start Googling those plants. Those plants have names. They're on LinkedIn. You can see the people, like go to the people search and then go to IT. This is kind of like a recruiting like little hack as well. This is what I do when I'm trying to find people. Like go to that plant, go to that company. You can literally look up like what are the top reactor companies? What are the top like nuclear supplier vendors? And then type that into LinkedIn, go to the
Yeah,
people, and then find the people who have your
what's
same
up?
job role and title, and then send them a message. Be like, hey, I'm interested in pivoting into the industry. What would you say? Because I think realistically, right now for the industry, they're trying to build out a framework for the workforce. And usually what they say is, we're going to go talk to the 10th graders. We got to
Mm,
start in kindergarten. And I'm like, whoa, 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 there are people right now willing to like up and move and get into this industry, but they just haven't quite gotten the infrastructure in place for that. I'm currently working on it, so like give me a second. Me and the DOE, we got a thing going. But yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Number one is to start networking. And through that network, you'll start to meet more people who will be able to be like, okay, you have this experience, we can put you maybe here. And it might look a little bit entry level. I think for the longest time, nuclear's kind of had like you work, security, and then you go your way up. It'll look kind of interestingly as we're literally evolving the industry because 40% of the workforce is retiring. But yeah, LinkedIn network, that's like the gold
key.
key, especially for people who have your similar job titles. They just work at a nuclear power plant or they just work at a supplier company.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll also drop in the link towards the end of our chat, resources and other like nonprofits that specifically work in nuclear energy. Again, like I am a huge supporter of Native Nuclear, who is supportive of Indigenous communities and getting them involved in understanding how they can be at the table. And that's when I'm like, okay, Black people got to be there as well. So let's continue to work together and even build our own tables. Again, there's like so much opportunity here. And to follow up with that, in terms of LinkedIn and visibility, Danielle, can you tell me, like, when you're reviewing applications, like, what immediately catches your eye and what may eliminate a potential candidate? Like, what are the do's and what are the don'ts?
Oh, do's and don'ts from the recruiting side. This is a really interesting time because I think right now a lot of companies are trying to find um the latest and great, like the people who have the most depth and experience in nuclear, but the industry itself has kind of been pretty stagnant for a while. And so if you come with a background where you've worked in a startup environment or you've worked to
Mm,
build a project, if you've taken the lead in projects, that's good. From some of the AI companies that I recruit for, they are looking for people who are building active LLMs in their workforce. And so you might not necessarily have all of the nuclear background, but if you are taking the initiative in your company to kind of progress your industry, that's really what they're looking for in the nuclear startup world is do you do it correct? And are you are you a project leader? Are you taking the initiative to get things done? I think other things I look for, um, I think in the interview as well. Do your research. Do your research. Do your research. Know who you're applying to. And know what they're trying to do. And so I think, some people in the chat were like, oh, I want to do regulatory. Whew, I'm covering that in a upcoming policy right now for we're doing a season on policy, and so that's one of the things that nuclear policy is a little bit much. And so what I wanted to do is start to give people a starting point of like, all right, here's an overview. But if you're looking at an AI company who is looking at how do we build out a framework, an AI for nuclear regulatory, you might need to learn a little something about nuclear regulatory because I'm gonna ask you, and then you're gonna be like, oh, I don't know. And
Mhm.
that's not good. Similarly to engineering, the American Nuclear Society has a course called Nuclear 101. And so
Yes.
that's kind of bringing everybody up to speed into like, how does nuclear work? And they actually take you through the math. Like you're doing math. So if you don't like math, like you might cry a little bit, that's fine. Um,
You'll
but
get
but
through it.
yeah. So I would say, yeah, do your research and show initiative.
And to your point about ANS or the American Nuclear Society Nuclear 101 course, I actually reached out to them today because I was like, I definitely want to know like how can I participate? How can we get involved? And I know that ANS has a conference coming up at the end of May in Denver. It is in person. There's currently a wait list, but this summer they're actually launching an online version. And I think that will be a great opportunity for everyone to be able to follow and understand again the foundation of nuclear and going into like the hand like understanding like again in depth like what it is from like beginning to end and also being able to articulate it because there's a range of professionals and backgrounds who are instructors for the 101 course from my understanding. I know you had Dr. Simon on your podcast, so feel free to expound on that and like why people should sign up for the course.
Yeah, so the Nuclear 101 course actually really came about because of the fact that they were getting so many people that are like, hey, what's going on? And they were coming from all different backgrounds. Museum curators, truck drivers, they're like, what is happening in the nuclear space? And the American Nuclear Society is like, hey, we are here to educate the public. And so they wanted to really bring in, and I think I'll try and link the episode on in the chat. They wanted to bring in a lot of different perspectives from start to finish uranium mining, like is mining okay, all the way to like the fuel cycle, what is a reactor, what is nuclear energy, all of that. And they wanted to break it down in a way that would allow um, everyday people to kind of understand a little bit more about the nuclear industry. And then so I'm going to post that in the chat right here. So that is the episode on the Nuclear 101 course. But typically, everybody who finishes the course is like, "Wow, what I feel
Mhm.
smart. I feel like I just took a college course. I feel
Right.
like it's a little bit intense. It's a little
Fence,
bit
yes.
you talk about fuel cycles. You talk about like core design of like what does a nuclear like reactor core look like?
Hello?
How can it overheat in parts? And
Hello,
so
can you hear me?
that's kind of how we're looking at the best practices around the Nuclear 101 course is they started it with literally a bunch of engineers and scientists and they made it maybe a little too sciencey. And so they've like reiterated, they've smoothed out some of the spots and it's gotten a lot better over time.
That's amazing. And I personally am excited for the online course. Of course, if anyone can go in person, it's also really funny. You get to know folks very well. I know currently it's a 5 day course. So you
Yeah.
will be busy learning, interacting, and working as a group together, which again is just part of any career, especially when you work in the energy industry. Before I open it up and go more into the questions in the chat, again, thank you everyone for dropping your questions. There's just like so much we can cover. But I want to go back to preparation again for like the parents and guardians who may have
Mm.
children in school. So for families with high schoolers, even middle schoolers who show interest in STEM, like which programs and resources exist right now that they can get into, especially with summer coming up. I know like there are some STEM programs that parents are applying for all the way like in January. So I want folks to be aware of these programs and how they can get involved because when it comes to, especially like with college admissions and STEM careers, if the parents don't have a strong understanding of what it is and how it works, there's a missed opportunity in being able to continue to build support for the child. Again, like there's many tools like between like working with school counselors, teachers, and even just like within the community. But I think it's really important that parents understand what the purpose of these programs are, what they can do, and then how they can get their child signed up.
Yeah, that's a good one. I kind of dropped into the chat some of the episodes. Realistically, like the season two is our nuclear education season. I would say that is a really good resource because I talk to students, I talk to like all different sorts of professors. Um, Internships are a big one. I'll start though from the K through 12 perspective. Again, American Nuclear Society is doing, they're really trying to move heaven and earth to get parents aware of the fact that nuclear offers really good opportunities for their kids. Just to put some numbers to it, 2 year associates degree, you're looking at potentially like a $10,000 cost to attend, and
Mm,
you're making 130 out of the gate.
wow.
And you might not be even working all the year. Like you might just be working outages. There are people who work like 6 months of outages. And so you
And
work
get
6 months of
that.
outages, you go 130, and then you just chill. I'll actually link the episode of that of somebody who does do outage work, and she's like, "Yeah, me and my husband, we live on the beach, and then we just
Mm,
drive." But the nice thing is that the American Nuclear Society has high school programs. Yeah, Sean said, "OMG, what?" Yeah, what? They have high school programs. And these high school programs are for people who want to learn more about nuclear energy, that maybe we go beyond what the schools are able to give. So they actually have a teacher program because right now, like you'll have a kid who's like, "Hey, teacher, can you tell me about nuclear energy?" And teacher's like, "I don't know nothing about it. I'm sorry, can't help you." And so that's where the nuclear or American Nuclear Society is stepping in to kind of bridge those roles of showing kids like, hey, this is what you can do in nuclear, and they get them contacted and networked with people in the industry. I would say that would be the first one. The second one, again, go to your local plant. If you don't have a local plant, go find a local plant. Go drive go drive to one.
Take a
Email
drive.
them. I was in the Czech Republic. I emailed them. I was like, hey, I'm gonna be in the Czech Republic. Is it okay if I drive down and come toward the plant? And they took me through the information center. Now, mind you, it was in Czech, but they were like, we will have a person who can translate in English. These nuclear centers spend so much money to showcase what nuclear energy is to children, and nobody goes.
How do
Um,
you think that
and
is?
and and so some people just they don't know that it exists.
Exists.
Yeah, they
Mm,
didn't know that there's like a literally a whole preschool, place center in a nuclear power plant. And so that's kind of the main reason why I think, getting kids of that age, understanding. So send emails, look at what your local plant is. You can be like, nuclear power plants near me, and some will pop up. It'll go take you to a website, look for the information center. The Sharon Harris nuclear power plant where I live, they just had a nuclear day. So you can come down and tour the site. I'm nosy, so I love touring a site. Like, I'm like, what y'all got going on in here? So yeah, I would say getting kids hands-on. I used to be a science educator, getting them hands-on, tactile, throwing facts and figures at them. Like if you say you can make $130,000 to a seventh grader, they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
So
That is easily relatable between
okay.
fields.
But if you take them down and you can show them like a fuel cell, if you can show them the reactor building, if you can show them how big the turbine deck is, they're like, whoa, that's crazy. And that's really what's going to motivate them into trying to even not even just nuclear, but all of these fields that require them to be hands-on and technical and use their creative background as well. So that's what I would say is definitely get hands-on in person.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, like there's just we definitely have to have like a part two or just definitely because there's just so much to nuclear and again, just like the career and workforce opportunities. I know that we had a poll launch for next steps. So Danielle, do you mind just also highlighting a few of the programs and certifications right quick, and also the locations that folks
Mhm.
travel to when it comes to working like the outages? I'm also just really curious.
Oh yeah, okay. So I mean, outage work is great because it's pretty much can happen wherever there is a nuclear power plant. And so states that have them, like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. You're looking at Michigan is a big one, Chicago, Illinois area. I saw some people from Chicago. We got one in Phoenix, Arizona. We got one in California,
Mhm.
Tennessee. I think there's a list out there. I'm gonna try and look the top nuclear states in the United States. It's right now. And so they're ranking this. Um, Okay, so the top 10 states. So I'll drop that one in the chat as well. So they're ranking this based on how much industry is coming. So Tennessee right now got ranked number one because there are so many companies about to build up in Tennessee. So Oak Ridge, Knoxville, Nashville, that's a big hub. Another big hub, Austin, Dallas, Texas A&M, and University of Texas are looking at spending a lot of, like, I mean, a lot of money, like a lot of money.
Right.
And so I would say out of the hubs that are they're looking to build, those ones, looking at universities that have nuclear programs is another big one. I dropped in the chat one of my conversations with Dr. Todd Allen out of the University of Michigan. They
Michigan.
have a program for high schoolers. It's run by Jeff Harper. He's a brother. And Jeff Harper does this full free program so that high schoolers can get paid by the University of Michigan to do research in the nuclear space.
Oh,
It's
that's
called the
amazing.
Harper All Stars. And so I'll try and drop that one in the chat as well. So that's a big one. In terms of certifications, the American Nuclear Society, they've just started a certified nuclear professional. And so that's if you take the Nuclear 101 course and you go through some ANS conferences and take some of their hours, and then you can apply to the certified nuclear professional. So let's say that you're in finance and you want to switch over. You're like, I was doing finance over here. I want to do finance and nuclear. Now, if you do like a certified nuclear professional, you're being able to show me, a recruiter or a company who works in nuclear, like, hey, is this person is taking the steps to get nuclear qualified, to understand the nuclear safety culture, to understand the industry. And so that is also what's going to set you apart is that certification course.
Wow. Okay. That's I find like that just alone, like just think of the certifications, it's like you definitely want to have like a plan for like also the time to commit to that. So I also just want to bring that to
Yeah.
mind. You definitely take the time to look
Save
for
up.
these programs, but also understand like how it can fit into your current lifestyle. Again, this is an investment in you. So do not be afraid to go for these programs.
Mhm.
And okay, let's get to some of the questions in the chat. Again, I apologize that they were kind of like all over the place, but there were just some like foundational questions I really wanted to get to because I felt like it would also answer some of the questions in the chat. I know Lee had a question about the Donut Lab. Is that a company claiming to solve the solid state battery problem? Is that something
Oh,
you have
I
knowledge
have
about,
no
Danielle?
idea. You said donut lab, and I was thinking about fusion reactors. I was like, what kind of donut? Like Krispy Kreme or yeah, I have no idea, but I will look into that because I'm sorry that I cannot give you more information on that on the donut lab.
Okay.
Um,
I know Onk had a question about like a viable future scenario where society chooses, oh, a question about what if society chooses not to build the data centers? What about ramping, because as a consequence of the unprocessable nuclear waste? Do you have any comments on that?
Oh yeah. So I'm this is gonna be coming out in season 4 of our policy season of nuclear proliferation. I feel like you need to be going into non-proliferation on the policy side because it does take into like it's not all sunshine and roses. You really do have to think of if you have an accurate operating reactor, you're going to be generating plutonium. And plutonium is what can be used to make weapons. And so here in the United States, we haven't been able to recycle spent nuclear fuel. And so we just store it. We just store it in these big old casks, heavily guarded. But now we're looking at how do we do this with laser enrichment? How do we do this with like, reprocessing fuels? But what's really interesting is I will drop into the chat. People are like, well, what are we gonna do with the waste? In Finland, there's called a deep geological repository. Geological
I was just going
repository.
to ask about that because I was like, there's one of the Scandinavian countries.
Yes. Yeah, one of the Scandinavian countries, Finland, is doing it. And what's really funny about the geological repositories, I have a guest on my podcast, Xeon Lights. You guys should follow her. She's always dropping TikToks and things about um, a lot of these questions on like what do we do with unprocessed fuels. So the deep geological repository, it sounds kind of a little simple when you think about it. Like we're just building a really big hole and we're
Mhm.
putting nuclear back in that really big hole. I'm just gonna leave it there, but it's like several miles underground. And so when you really think about like what are we doing with the waste? This is why I say clean is kind of one of those words that I'm like, what do you mean by clean?
Hmm.
Because if we're looking at solar panels, what do we need to generate lithium? Like, have y'all been by a lithium mine? Like, what do we need to generate, wind? And wind and solar, those assets do not last as long as a nuclear plant. A nuclear plant can get licensed out for 100 years. Wind and solar is like 20 and done. So you're going to have to constantly be replacing those. And so, are we going to stop building data centers? Are you going to stop using your phone?
Yes.
Like, are we going to stop doing Zoom? And so I think, the conversation that I had with Zion kind of talks about, her new book. It's called Energy is Life. And it talks about can we do energy in a way that we can protect the environment? And what are the energy sources that we're going to be able to use or going to have to use in order to protect our environment, especially Black environments, maintain our water supplies, not pollute the groundwater, and the air, and also have your lights on.
Right.
It's this really weird conundrum of for the longest time we've just been like, just throw it in the air. But yeah, I would say there is a really good source. It is from the EPA, and they have a tracker, emissions tracker. So type in your area code and see where you live, what the emissions are. And you'll see that for the nuclear areas, the emission, like if they're high, if you utilize a lot of nuclear energy, the emissions are pretty low. But if it's the opposite, it's really high and then go into what those emissions are within, what you're breathing. I used to be a firefighter. The firefighter cancer rates are ridiculous because we're breathing in a lot of weird stuff. And so that's kind of the other part for me is really trying to figure out what is the best way for us to do energy. It is a trade-off. We're going to have some bad things and some good things. So what's the best case scenario for us to do?
Yes. And I think of it as, again, another opportunity for folks to get involved because just because it is like seen as like an issue or a challenge, again, it's a challenge which we can find solutions to. So with like just our lifestyles today, especially in the US, we're not going to get rid of electricity. So like let's work together. Again, not everyone has to do the same thing. Leverage your skills, your talents. Like we all have our roles and how we can support these efforts. So going into the next question, Tisha asked, for students transitioning into cybersecurity and critical infrastructure careers without traditional engineering backgrounds, what experiences or skills make someone stand out in this industry? Really good
Ooh,
question.
yeah, that is a good question. And I think this is where I would probably start to connect people with EPRI, that's the Electrical Power Research Institute, because they're doing research, but they're doing some really cutting edge stuff on how are we thinking about like the next generation of cybersecurity as it relates to nuclear assets as we start to get really, really more involved. Like even Amazon's not immune, Microsoft, Black IT Academy, it sounds like y'all are tracking like, AI outages and things like that. And so, in terms of where should people get started and what would make them stand out, I would say first read up on the industry, and kind of know a little bit about, the major accidents. That'd be kind of the first step. And then the major regulations. That's the second step. Because, what you're really going to try and showcase is that you are different from everybody else who also wants this job based on the knowledge that you have on your own acquired.
Hmm.
You're going to probably show that in your cover letter. You're going to show that from not from your resume. I know it's hard. Like from a recruiting standpoint, if you're really trying to break into an industry, you don't have the resume to just slide to somebody and be like, "Give me a job." That does
Right.
not work because these companies are looking for people who have years of experience in nuclear. And if that's not you, then your resume isn't really going to translate. But what you have to show is proof and receipts. And so I would say this is why again I'm coming back into the LinkedIn portion of looking for internships. If you're in college or in schools, IT internships, cyber internships, research, Electrical Power Institute, what they're doing on cybersecurity research as it relates to nuclear facilities. Start reading up on that, and then ask people in the cyber realm of like, hey, I saw that EPRI was doing this, and that. I'm not an IT person, so I don't know what y'all be doing. This is not. If I'm looking to research that, where would I start? Because
Mm.
what you can, like, what your resume is going to show is that you maybe have some IT experience. That's great. You and 10,000 other people. But what is really differentiating you is does this person take the initiative to start conversations that are pertinent to understanding the industry? Not just like, hey, how do I get a job? Nobody wants that in their inbox. Nobody wants that, but show that you have the initiative to be able to start researching on your own, looking up things. I end all my podcasts by saying, like, stay curious. So, yeah, like, stay curious. If you have a question, go try and figure it out. If you get blocked, like, if you're like, I don't understand why cyber wise, why we kind of got there, like, why did we do that instead of this? That's when you go ask somebody who's in the industry. And that way, you're starting to build a name for yourself. Stay in the comment section of these conversations. Start joining on LinkedIn into some of these cyber groups that are maybe more specific to nuclear. That is more likely going to get you where you want to be than your resume alone. And so you can start to look for entry level positions in the places that I said, like the utilities, a lot of the startups. But really, the networking is what's going to differentiate you because this person's going to be like, oh, Sunshine asked a really good question, and I never thought about that. So let me maybe put a pin in that. Maybe I want her on my team. Maybe
Mm.
she's the type of person that like asks good questions and things like that. So that's that's what I would say in terms of if you're pivoting from the industry, your past resume is great, but you have to prove yourself in some way that you are nuclear material.
That's really important. And it also makes me think of a portfolio. So it's not just like your resume to show, like, okay, that's what I've done in the past, but also building up your nuclear literacy and your visibility. Someone else had mentioned to me recently as well as like why it's important to also like make comments in the chats because not just
Mhm.
like about engagement, but it's also like seeing what someone like or how someone responds to you will also be able to okay build up another tangible link to a potential relationship. So it's like okay, this person sees I'm engaged, and then from there maybe ask for that person to like meet online or in person. Again, it's really about relationship building in the nuclear industry.
Definitely.
So following up with that, I know someone, I see Willie asked about security clearances. Like,
Clearances.
is it a
Yeah.
required, like what types of roles are required for clearance? And if there are not, or let me just start there, like which roles are required or
Yeah.
require security clearance?
Well, Willie, if you are coming from the Raytheon side, I'm guessing you probably already have a clearance, and that should be transferable, most likely. But overall, like if you're not doing specifically deep tech research that's somewhat related to weapons, defense, any of that, then those are usually Q clearance, and more specifically, Q clearances for people who are naturalized citizens or American citizens. So somebody who is here and is gotten, the thumbs up from Uncle Sam. And so that's the from the clearance side. I will say from the clearance perspective, though, when you're going into whether it's a utility, and I say utility, these are the companies that are generating power or like a vendor. So that'd be like a GE Hitachi or Vernova Hitachi or Westinghouse. Your clearances there would be if you're getting into anything that starts to kind of align a little bit higher more with some of those government or militarized operas like operations. It'd be that. But the background checks are extensive. They're quite
Hmm.
extensive and they take a long time. And so nuclear actually loses a lot of people in the workforce pipeline because they can't wait that long. So if you're looking to join like nuclear tomorrow, good luck. It's gonna be a minute. But that's good because you guys are like, oh, nuclear is dangerous. If you have the perception that nuclear is dangerous, then do you want a background check that takes like 48 hours, or do you
No,
want it to be a little more extensive? You typically would want it to be a little more extensive. So these are things that can take upwards of 6 months.
6 months.
It's
Okay, good to
it's
know.
a little slow. It's a little slow. So if you're thinking about making that career, like just bake in 6 months, and now you're thinking about how many connections can I be making on LinkedIn in 6 months? Because from my perspective, I also am not. I was a firefighter. I didn't come from the industry. I just kind of weaseled my way in with a podcast, and I ask a lot of questions. And so that's the other reason why I want to show people like there are opportunities. The industry itself is new to this idea that they're going to need a lot of people. So they're still kind of feeling it out. But that's why I would say networking above anything.
Very important. Um, and just also out of curiosity, in terms of like project management, so if someone has like a PMP and tech management experience, would those roles also require the security clearance, or is it just more so based on like what that person's doing as far as projects?
Yeah, it would definitely depend on what you're doing as far as projects. A lot of the construction projects are pretty open. Um, but in terms of projects, they kind of really like to see, depending on what you're doing, if you're looking at like a startup that is looking to actually build a new reactor, they would like to see more product experience in construction or a large project management or budget is a big one. So that's one big one. If you're looking at kind of smaller project management, really what they're looking at, from like a vendor side, like a Westinghouse or a GE Vernova, is does this person lead projects that make an impact?
Hmm.
Um, I think that's kind of where companies are really nowadays. Everybody's got a really good idea. Like they're like, oh my gosh, I got a great idea. Like, okay, that's step one. Step two is like, oh, and I got to follow through about it. Um, but then step three is like, is this a good idea because you feel it in your heart and it's really nice, or does this actually make an impact? Think about it from a company perspective to our bottom line. Does it make things more efficient? Does it make us faster? Does it make us safer? And
Hmm.
like it's one of those where you have to kind of show proof. You have the burden of proof. So if you're proving within the projects that you're leading, and if they're high stakes, if you don't get the project on, what happens? So that's the other
Side.
mhm.
Hmm. And I wanted to quickly get to, oh my gosh, we have so many great questions.
Mhm.
Let's discuss like remote roles and kind of related to this, Ralph asked, I did, or he says, I did EHS coordination for 8 years in the oil and gas while transitioning into tech. Are EHS roles more on site or are some remote opportunities as well?
Yeah, I would say it's looking kind of depends.
Um,
You'll see some hybrid ones out there, and I would say a lot of times if you're new to the industry and new to the company, they usually like you on site.
on site.
Especially kind of anything that involves in environmental health, because they're needing you there to kind of either do like site cleanup or looking at, hey, how do we best do a practice here, or like somebody just teaching you hands-on. And so that's kind of the biggest thing. And a lot of that will kind of be related to they also call it EM in nuclear, so like yeah, environmental management.
Mhm.
Um, all of that being related, they want to kind of show you how to do it the nuclear way. And so that's kind of why it's going to be on site, but also related to outages. And so for EHF or EHS on outages, you're looking at okay, we're scrubbing down this reactor vessel. And now all the rags that we use are nuclear contaminated material. What do we do with them? How do we dispose of them? And so tracking that whole process and that whole timeline of making sure that that environment stays the way it's supposed to over the course of that time. So yeah, I would say for switching into the industry, it's going to look on site. But this is where I would say use the LinkedIn network of finding other EHS people and talking
Mhm.
to them about how they got to where they were. Because nuclear is so big, I would be lying to y'all if I told you how to get into every single role. That's what I'm saying. Go talk to the people who work in these places because they're going to give you way more pertinent information than me.
Yes. The firsthand experience is what you want to hear about as well.
Mhm.
And again, like when you are in person, you're taking in like how things actually operate and you can provide more insight and analysis versus just working remotely. So my personal recommendation would be, yes, definitely go for the remote roles if you feel like that's a good fit for you. But definitely if you're breaking into any kind of new industry, it's great to be able to build those relationships again, being in person if possible.
Yeah.
I know we have about 10 more minutes, so I want to get to at least like two, three more questions.
Yeah.
So asked, where are we seeing common subcontracting for the nuclear industry?
Outages and some of these new construction projects. So this season on my podcast, we're actually talking about nuclear construction. Ooh.
Yes.
And the biggest thing about that is we really haven't been doing nuclear construction for a while successfully in this country. We've had some failed projects. And so for the product managers, like put your listening ears on, the failed projects go over budget, over schedule. And so right now, I think the industry as a whole is trying to figure out this whole scheduling, budgeting, regulatory quagmire. When they do that correctly and do that right, then things go well. When they do that wrong, things go
Oh,
bad, real bad. Not bad in the dangerous sense, bad in the expensive sense. But to the taxpayers, they don't care. If you
right.
waste their money, you waste their money, and they're not happy about it. Um, but yeah, I would say really in terms of what we're looking at as a whole, there are a lot of subcontractor positions that are kind of popping up. Like Dan Zimmerman would be one, where if you go on their website for Dan Zimmerman, um, they show you what they're needing based on their outages. Another one is nukeworker.com. They are a job working forum. I'll try and post those two into the chat. But they'll show you the outages across the country. And with that, um, when they show you the outages, they kind of show you who is leading the contracts and who's got the subcontracts for all of those. But there are so many. It's nested and nested and nested and nested. But yeah, I would say let me type in Dan Zimmerman as well. Um, yeah, the nice thing about nuclear is there are so many job roles. Back to that previous slide. So the subcontracting could be anything from pipe fitting and welding, like so you're welding all day. But then it could also be something like, oh, you're painting. You
Right.
wouldn't think that painting is a big thing in nuclear, but no, 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 it is. making sure the paint isn't rusted and making sure that it hasn't been exposed to a certain level of radiation is huge, and making sure there's no cracks. So that's why the subcontracting is really massive, because of the fact that it spans so large of what can be done during a an outage. Mhm.
That's a great topic that I would love to explore in the future. So definitely, Danielle, if there's other people you recommend, please let us know. Like I can follow up and share with the Discord community because understanding how to even begin like creating the like RFPs. I know Cell is that's
Mhm.
part of his consultancy. So definitely, Cell, I want to connect with you on that. So like we can create some programming for that because it's good to know exactly like what templates could be in place to just make it much more feasible to win these bids.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Okay, so for our last question, thank you again, Danielle, for tonight. Like, there's just so much information I'm
There
absorbing. Now it
is.
makes me
There is. Mhm.
it's making me think of, oh, we got to like do programming for this. So definitely, like, I love to connect with you one on one, even like for that. Like, I'm very big on workforce development again. I know we had a question about your previous background as a firefighter. You made the pivot, and Kelly asked, like, what was your certification that you got upon leaving firefighting?
Oh, so for firefighting, I was a firefighter paramedic. So I had my firefighter one and two. This is like your basic firefighting certifications. I had my paramedic license, so I could, stab people in the chest if they needed it, only if they needed it. And I had a hazmat. I had so many certifications, honestly. It was maybe too much. Because then you kind of do this thing where you're juggling all these certifications and trying to re-up hazmat certification. So I was a hazmat technician. The
Mm.
tough thing, I'm not very tall. When Corinne and I met, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, wow, she's up
By the
there.
age. Yeah.
I'm 5'1", 5'2" on a good day. And so none of my hazmat suits fit me. So I was like,
Hmm.
running around in an oversized
Let
suit.
me get it.
But yeah, you gather a lot, and what's funny is utilities. I should probably try and share a picture of this. Utilities have hazmat and um, and firefighting. So, I mean, like if I wanted to, I could, like sign up to be a firefighter at a facility or
I was
at a
gonna say.
utility. I'll try and find one of the pictures there, but I saw a fire truck and I'm a pretty big nerd about fire truck. I'm like, oh my God, it's a fire truck. I don't know how to drive that. But yeah, the pivot for me, honestly, was the fact that I wanted to be an want to be an astronaut, and so I made the pivot into nuclear because I was like, hey, I got to get a master's degree in something. So let's make it nuclear energy.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I like to leave it to you for any closing thoughts you'd like to share as we begin to wrap up.
Yeah, okay. So I think the biggest thing, use LinkedIn to your advantage and be specific. Don't just come to somebody and be like, hey, can you help me? Because honestly, the way the workforce is set up right now and with AI, not just related to nuclear, but in general, is it's moving quickly. People are doing things fast. And so if you're looking to kind of, within nuclear or anywhere else, get on LinkedIn, start networking in a way that makes you valuable to other people. That's why I started the podcast. I wanted to be valuable to the public to be like, hey, let's make a wealth of information all in one place. People can ask questions. I ask dumb questions all the time. I love asking dumb questions on my podcast because then, usually my host gives me or my guest gives me a very basic answer. And I like to keep it basic. We like to keep it like right here, so that people can understand and make informed decisions.
Yeah.
But yeah, get on LinkedIn, get super specific, and ask really good questions to people who are in roles that you might want to be in. Because the other thing is they might hate their job. Then they come to me. So then ask them like, what are the struggles of the job that you're having? And that way you can kind of come off as authentic. Like you're not selling anything. People don't want to be sold. But you're really asking them, how do I get to, where you are? If you don't like where you are, where are you going? How do I get to where you're going?
Mhm.
And what ways can I be of value? So if you connect with me, which most of y'all did, I'll send you like a quick little message and be like, how can I be of value.
Value.
So yeah.
Thank you so much again. Everyone, give a round of applause to Danielle. Again, I can continue picking your brain, and I'd love to have you back for part two, maybe even doing something specific again when it comes to like STEM programming.
Mhm.
Again, because you're a science educator, and it's just a great talent to be able to disseminate this information in digestible bits so that people will be able to apply that new gained knowledge. So thank you again for joining us. Like Danielle said, please connect with her on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow up and definitely listen to the podcast. She's going into season 3, and I've already learned so much, especially just from season 2, because I come from the education background and just want to get all the babies to know like what they can
Yeah.
do to make again these informed decisions. Because if you don't know what you don't know, then you're missing out on these amazing opportunities. Before we close tonight, though, I would like to plug our next event, Black IT Academy. We are, again, big on entrepreneurship and for folks to be able to understand how to build our businesses, but as well as how you can understand the tax system. For folks who, like myself, I'm a new consultant, bring up my own business. We have Marie Sutton, who is one of the beta admins, who will be leading this event on on Monday, May 19th at 6:30 p.m. Central. So we'll drop the Eventbrite link in the chat so that you can register for that event. Again, it's free, it'll be virtual. And this is just one of the many events where you can tap into the community and learn about LLCs, business banking, and how to just avoid common mistakes. So please join our Discord, stay tuned for our next event, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a pleasure, and if you have any other questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes and see again how we can be of support to the community. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Cool beans. Well, thank you so much
Yes.
for having me. This was great. I got like 1,700 different LinkedIn requests, so I'm excited